Today we're going to talk about how to rip narrow boards with your table saw safely. We'll show you 3 different methods so that you can get pieces about a 1/2 inch thick and all the way down to a 1/16 of an inch thick. And these methods are going to be safe and help make sure that you don't injure yourself while doing that. As always, if you like what we're putting out, if you like this video, please hit the like button down below and subscribe for future content. All right, let's get into it.
We are at the table saw today where I want to give you a few tips on how to safely rip stock into thin pieces on a table saw. And there's several different techniques that we can use, and we'll go over those. But let's just use this 2x4 basically as our piece of test wood. And let's say we want to cut a piece of wood, a strip off of it that's a 1/2 inch. So I would mark a 1/2 inch on this, and I tend to scribe with a knife and then follow up with a pencil. Then we just square that across the board using the familiar T-square. Now we're going to line this up, and we're going to look on the blade for a tooth that is pointed toward the fence. These tooths alternate, one toward the fence and one away from the fence. So we find one that's toward the fence and we bring it into our scribe line so that we are on the scribe line, and that we have a 1/2 inch beyond the scribe line, between the scribe line and the fence. Now here's where I have to talk a little bit about safety, because the issue with doing what I'm about to do is that the narrow piece can fairly easily get pinched, or if you don't hold it pinched, meaning between the blade and the fence, in which case it could shoot, the whole piece you're cutting could shoot back into you. Or if I just took this by hand and went right through without properly holding down this piece next to the blade, that piece could separate and fire back. Neither of those are good, because you can get hurt when that happens. So what we need to do is find a way to hold both the outside of the board and the piece of board that's going, the offcut that's going through the blade, in some way. Now what I use is a narrow push device, and this simply has a little hook on the back, and that hook hooks over the wood, and this is narrow enough to fit in this 1/2 inch gap between the fence and the blade. So let me show you how to do this. I'm going to turn on some dust collection and the saw, and I will talk to you when I'm done. So we've demonstrated how to rip something down to about a 1/2 inch width using a push stick similar to this. By the way, you can make these push sticks out of plywood. You just sort of draw the shape and cut the thing out on another type of saw, like a scroll saw. But let's now talk about what happens if I want a thinner thing than this 1/2 inch width. Well, if I try to do it thinner against the fence in the same geometry where I did this 1/2 inch cut, if I try to do that, I'm going to have a very narrow piece. The narrow piece that I'm trying to cut will be between the blade and the fence. And when I push that through, since I can't hold it, it's too thin, we have a great danger that it will fly out. And it will not only will that be dangerous, but you also will not quite complete the cut, and you won't get a good cut the entire length of that piece. So the better way to do the narrower piece is to cut the piece that you want on the outside of the blade. using the fence and then safely being able to push through. So the way we do that is, once again, to mark the width that we want. Then you line it up. Bear in mind that you want the pointed piece toward the outside. And so you line that up with the pencil mark. Set up the fence, and now we're going to safely push this through, and the offcut will be on this side. Now, you're probably gonna say, well, it could fly this way. It could, but it probably won't, because it's not pinched between the blade and the fence. So let's execute this cut. So here you see we have successfully cut a fairly narrow board, and you can do even narrower. It's just a matter of your measuring skills. What if I wanted to repeat this and cut a bunch of boards that are thin, and I want them all to be the exact same thickness? Well, that's problematic, because each time I have to move the fence in the method we just showed, where the offcut is on the outside of the blade. I would have to move the fence each time. And believe me, I don't care how accurate you are at marking and then setting it up, these are not going to be identical unless we do something different. And the way we're going to do something different is to use this jig. This jig is one that I bought from Rockler. But you could make a jig like this. You just simply need a point out here that will ride on the wood. So for the first one, we will mark the wood and we will set up the cut. So this is the method for cutting the first in a series of boards that you want all to be the same thickness. So there, I've set up the first one, locked down the fence. Now I put this jig against the piece of wood and I cinch it down. What that's going to allow me to do, first of all, I can safely push it through, because as it goes into the blade, it will disengage from this point here, making it not an entrapment shoot back possibility. But then when I'll show you how then I do another cut that's identical. So let's do this first one. So as you see, I've safely cut a very narrow, ripped a very narrow piece of stock. So let's repeat that cut and come out with exactly the same width. So I will now unlock the fence, and instead of looking at the blade at all, I will bring the board up against the apex of this jig and lock it down. So here I've cut a second piece, and they are identical. Identical in thickness. I can rub my hand across here and I don't even feel that seam. So, to review, we've shown you two different methods. One method is to make the narrow cut between the blade and the fence. And we do that guiding the piece through the cut with a push stick that's narrow enough to fit between the fence and the blade. If you want something more narrower than that, then you line it up by marking it, and line it up and have the offcut, what you want, on the outside of the blade. And then if you want that to be repeatable, you can use this ripsaw jig and then just repeatably cut the same thickness of rips. As always, if you like the video, we hope you'll hit the like button, And we also suggest you subscribe so that you'll be notified of our future content.